Imagine this: you open your eyes, and all around you is sand. Not just a little, not the playful strip of golden beach you might know, but an endless ocean of it. The air wavers in the heat, the horizon itself seems to melt, and the sun leans down like a merciless overseer, its weight pressing against your skin. The wind shifts, and with it comes a whisper, soft, almost human, as grains of sand hiss and slide across the surface of the dunes. You stand there, and for a moment it feels like the whole world is nothing but desert. Empty. Silent. Eternal. That is the illusion. The Sahara, the great desert, loves to play this trick on us. To make us believe it has always been barren, a land destined for lifelessness. But beneath the dunes, within the stone valleys, carved into cliffs, and scattered across its hidden basins, lies another truth. The desert is a mask. And behind it rests a memory, a library of forgotten rivers, lost kingdoms, and the shadows of civilizations that once thrived where now only sandstorms roam. Picture the Sahara as a stage. Today, it's a stage set for desolation, where only nomads, camels, and the occasional caravan manage to survive. But rewind the clock, and the set transforms. The backdrop turns green. Lakes glimmer in the sun, rivers carve paths across the land, and animals, yes, crocodiles, giraffes, elephants, hippos, graze on its plains. People, too, not just wandering hunters, but farmers, builders, storytellers, entire cultures, rooted in what we would now call impossible ground. And so the desert is not only a mystery, it is a paradox. It erases, yet it preserves. It swallows whole kingdoms, yet in the same act entombs their traces, holding them in silence until the day we stumble upon them. Walk with me a moment. Step with bare feet into the sand, feel its burn, and let your imagination begin to peel back the layers. Beneath your toes, in some places, lie the ghost rivers of another age. Rivers with banks once crowded by fishers and farmers. Rivers that fed orchards, fields, and even towns. The ground may look empty, but if you could drink its silence, you'd taste the memory of water. Close your eyes. The sound of wind could just as easily be the lap of waves against a lakeshore 10,000 years ago. The brightness in the air could just as easily be the reflection of sunlight off vast waters. Lake Megachad stretching further than you could walk in weeks. Imagine standing there, at the edge of such a lake, watching herds of cattle drink, children laughing as they splash, boats cut from hollow trees rocking gently at the shore. That world is gone. But not entirely. For as the desert expands, it leaves behind fossils, bones, carvings in rock, and the occasional flash of pottery or tool half buried in the sand. They are fragments, yes, but together they whisper, this was not always a desert. And isn't that haunting? To think that what we call the Sahara, the dead heart of Africa, was once alive beyond measure. To realize that every grain of sand might be a remnant of drowned fertility. Yet here's the trick of the desert: it doesn't reveal its secrets easily. It keeps them hidden under dunes that shift overnight, under heat that discourages digging, under storms that bury and rebury traces of the past. To walk here is to walk in a place where time plays games. You can stand on a dune and know that 1,000 years ago, beneath your feet, there might have been a farmer's home. 2,000 years ago, a Garamantian canal. 10,000 years ago, the footprints of a hippo sliding into water. Do you hear that? A faint ringing, almost like bells. Caravan bells, swaying on the necks of camels. It's a memory too, though it belongs to another age of the desert, when traders, not farmers, moved across these sands, carrying salt, gold, and human lives. Even in its aridity, the Sahara was not empty. It became a highway, harsh but vital, stitching together empires at its edges. But that is later. For now, linger with me in this paradox. The desert is both grave and museum, eraser and archivist. It destroys so much and yet holds clues in the most fragile of ways. A smear of pigment on a cave wall, the skeleton of a crocodile in what is now a dune field, the faint outline of irrigation tunnels dug by hands that have turned to dust. Imagine standing at the edge of one of these forgotten valleys at dusk. The sky burns orange, the dunes glow like embers, and the air cools just enough to carry a scent of minerals, dry and sharp. Beneath you, stone. And on that stone? Petroglyphs, rock art carved by hands long gone. You brush the sand away and see a giraffe taller than yourself etched in the rock. You see hunters with bows. You see cattle. And you realize, these are not idle doodles. They are memories, testimonies. They are people insisting to the future. We lived here. We thrived here. Do not forget us. And yet we almost did. For centuries, outsiders looked at the Sahara and saw only void. Only wilderness. Only the absence of civilization. But the truth waits, patient as stone, waiting for us to listen. The wind rises again, pulling at your clothes, tugging you forward. And so we follow. The desert always pulls us forward, always deeper. The sand underfoot crunches, each step a reminder of impermanence. And ahead lies the question that hangs over every dune. If the Sahara was once green, once alive, once home, what happened? What turned this land from paradise into exile? That is the story the sands want to tell. And we, like travelers in the night, must lean close, listen hard, and let the desert's secrets unfold. The wind quiets. The last grains of sand slip down the slope of a dune, and silence pools around us, heavy and expectant. It's almost as if the desert itself is waiting, inviting us to look past its present mask of gold and see the truth of what came before. For the Sahara was not always this endless sea of dryness. Long before the sandstorms, long before the camel caravans, long before the dunes swallowed rivers and towns alike, there was another Sahara. Close your eyes and let the world rewind. Picture the dunes collapsing back into soil, rivers rushing again where today there is only silence. The sky is the same white sky, but the air carries moisture, thick with the scent of rain. Thunder rolls across the horizon. You are no longer standing in the desert. You are standing in a savanna, a land of green, of abundance of life. 10,000 years ago, this was the Sahara. A place not of exile, but of settlement. Rain fell here, real rain, not the sting of sand carried by the wind but the soft drumming of water against earth. Monsoons swept northward, pulled further than today by subtle shifts in the tilt of the earth, by the pulse of climate cycles older than memory. These rains gave birth to lakes so vast they rivaled seas. They carved rivers that braided across plains. They filled valleys until the desert bloomed like a hidden Eden. And the animals came. Can you hear them? The splash of hippos plunging into cool water. The trumpet of elephants as they roam grasslands where now only dunes rise. Giraffes stretch their long necks to pluck leaves from acacia trees. Crocodiles lurk along riverbanks. This is not imagination. Their bones have been found beneath the sand, entombed like offerings. Fossils of fish, turtle shells, even whale bones have surfaced from the desert, proof that the Sahara once mirrored the fertility of the Serengeti. Humans came too. Not wanderers lost in emptiness, but communities who built lives here. They followed the rains, learned the rhythms of lakes and rivers, planted crops in soil now long vanished. Imagine walking into a village here 7,000 or 8,000 years ago. Huts built of reeds and would cluster near the shore of a vast lake. Smoke curls from cooking fires. Children chase each other barefoot, their laughter carried across the water. Women grind grain on stones, while men return with fish strung on lines, caught from canoes carved from tree trunks. It is easy to forget, when standing in the present desert, that such scenes ever existed. But archaeology has pulled their memory back to us. Grindstones worn smooth by hands long gone, shards of pottery with traces of meals once cooked, arrowheads scattered where hunters crouched in the tall grass. These fragments whisper that the Sahara was once a heartland, not a wasteland. Step with me further into this ancient landscape. The air is heavy with the sound of cicadas, the croak of frogs, the beating of insect wings. The ground beneath us is damp, rich, dark with fertility. A herd of cattle moves slowly across the plains. Their presence is not wild, they are domesticated. This too is astonishing. The Sahara was one of the earliest cradles of herding, where people began to keep animals not just for the hunt but as companions in survival. Picture the rhythm of their days, waking to milk cattle at dawn, shaping clay into vessels to carry water, weaving baskets from reeds. These people were farmers, herders, fishers, and hunters all at once, adapting to the cycles of flood and drought, making use of every gift the land offered. They lived with abundance. They lived with memory of water. And then, slowly, something shifted. The rains grew fickle. At first, perhaps, a mist season here or there. The lakes shrank a little, their shorelines retreating. Rivers grew shallower. But then came years of absence, and the green Sahara began to brown. The climate was changing again, tilting back toward dryness. Within centuries, whole lakes turned to marsh, marshes to dust. Crops withered. Animals wandered further and further for water. People, too, were forced to move, some southward, some northward, seeking the rivers that still flowed, the valleys that had not yet given up their moisture. But for a long time, even as the desert tightened its grip, people clung on. Rock shelters in what is now the driest heart of the Sahara are decorated with art that tells this story. Etched and painted onto stone are images of cattle, herds vast enough to suggest wealth and stability. There are hunters with bows, fishers with nets, women in ceremonial dress. And then, as the centuries pass, the art shifts. The herds shrink. The fish disappear. Instead, camels begin to appear, the animal of dryness, the ship of the desert, replacing the hippos and crocodiles. This is how the Sahara's transformation was recorded, not in written words, but in the slow change of its images. A diary carved into stone, written across millennia. Pause a moment and imagine standing before one of these petroglyphs. The air around you is searing, the wind hot and sharp, the land silent except for the hiss of sand. But on the rock is a giraffe, taller than you, elegant in its lines. Someone, thousands of years ago, stood here with a tool and carved it, looking at an animal that walked before them. You are sharing a gaze across 10 millennia. That is the strangeness of the Sahara. It invites you into intimacy with ghosts. You walk through dunes and see nothing but emptiness. But then you stumble upon a fossilized shell, and suddenly you are standing on the shore of a vanished lake. You see a line of carvings, and suddenly you are among people who lived where no life should be possible. The desert strips away, but in the same act, it preserves. And so when we say, before the sands, we are not talking about a vague possibility. We are talking about a real world that lived, breathed, and thrived here. A Sahara with rains and rivers, elephants and orchards, towns and traditions. A Sahara where survival did not mean enduring, but flourishing. The tragedy, and the wonder, is that it is gone, yet not gone. The bones, the carvings, the fragments of pottery all insist that we remember. They speak in silence, and the desert answers by burying them again. The wind picks up now, tugging at our clothes, pulling us onward. The green Sahara has faded in our vision, but its memory lingers like a scent in the air, like the echo of thunder in the distance. Ahead lies the first true evidence of its vastness, the basin of Lake Megachad, a water giant that once sprawled across a land now claimed by dust. The desert is taking us deeper still, into stories both magnificent and melancholy. The wind carries us onward, across the dried bed of vanished lakes and through valleys where the memory of water still lingers in the soil. The Sahara whispers with every gust of sand, a reminder that what we see now is only the last act of a much older play. Yet the desert is not silent, not truly. For scattered across its cliffs, hidden in its shelters, and carved into stone faces worn by 10,000 years of weather, voices remain. They speak in pictures. They speak in shadows of animals, in lines etched by hands that wanted to be remembered. This is where the Sahara reveals not just bones and fossils, but art, petroglyphs, engravings, and paintings left by people who once called this land home. Imagine walking through a dry wadi, a valley that hasn't seen water in centuries. The ground crunches beneath your boots, brittle and stony. You pass under an overhang of sandstone, red as rust, and then, suddenly, you see it. At first, it looks like scratches, random grooves in the wall. But as your eyes adjust, shapes emerge. A giraffe, its long neck stretched high, carved with surprising elegance. Beside it, a man with a bow, his arms taut in the act of a hunt. A crocodile, mouth gaping wide. An entire world inscribed in stone. These are not idle marks. They are stories, recorded without words. They are memory, made permanent in rock, a kind of immortality. The artists could never have known that their savannas would turn to sand, that their rivers would vanish, that their villages would disappear. But perhaps they sensed something. Perhaps that is why they carved, so that when the land was gone, their lives would not vanish with it. Walk closer, and notice the detail. Horns of cattle carefully traced, muscles of hunters hinted with single lines, women dancing in circles with arms raised. This was no desert doodling. This was devotion. Some of the art is so large, so deliberate, it would have taken days or weeks to complete, chiseling slowly into stone with tools harder than the rock itself. To create art in such a way was to stake a claim. We are here, we belong, we endure. Now lift your gaze. Above the valley stretches a cliff face, pockmarked with hundreds of engravings. They are layered, some newer, some older, a palimpsest of centuries. At the bottom, you see images of wild animals, lions, ostriches, elephants, hippos. Life in abundance, the green Sahara's zoo etched permanently. Above them, a new layer begins, herds of cattle, domesticated, carefully herded by human figures. This is more than hunting scenes. This is culture. A record of the shift from nomadic hunters to settled pastoralists, frozen forever in stone. And then, even higher, the carvings shift again. Chariots. Camels. Riders with weapons. The green Sahara had become dry by then, and the people adapted once more. What began as art of abundance became art of survival. Through these layers, we do not just see pictures, we see change, adaptation, resilience. Imagine standing here with the artists. The sun beats down, but the cliff casts shade. One figure crouches with a stone tool, chipping carefully at the rock, sparks flickering with each strike. Another prepares pigment, grinding red ochre, yellow minerals, black charcoal, mixing them with fat or water to paint instead of carve. Around them, children laugh, animals low, fires crackle. Perhaps songs were sung as they worked, chants to give rhythm to the slow chisel. These walls were canvases, but they were also shrines. Some believe the rock art was not only decorative but spiritual. That to carve a giraffe was not merely to record it, but to honor it, to ensure its spirit remained bound to the land. Others suggest the art was teaching, visual lessons for children, or maps of migration routes, or records of myths. Whatever the reason, the effect remains the same, voices from 10,000 years ago, speaking without words, across silence and sand. Now step into the Tassili Eniger of Algeria, one of the greatest galleries of the Sahara. Here, high plateaus hide over 15,000 images carved and painted across stone. Giraffes taller than a man, cattle with horns curling like crescents, figures dancing in what seems almost like a trance. Some scenes show humans wearing masks, half animal, half human, caught in ritual. These are not just daily life, they are glimpses of ceremony, of myth, of a belief that the line between human and animal, flesh and spirit, was thin and permeable. Imagine walking through these canyons at night, a torch in hand. The flames flicker across the images, bringing them to life. The giraffes sway. The dancers seem to move. The hunters' bows stretch tight. The art is alive in the shadows, alive in memory, alive in you. And isn't that the power of it? That across thousands of years, across climates that have shifted, across languages that have vanished, these images still speak directly to us. They need no translation. We know instantly what we see: a hunter chasing prey, a mother nursing a child, a circle of dancers celebrating. Humanity, unchanged in its essence. But the art also unsettles. For as you move through it, you realize how much has been lost. Crocodiles in the Sahara? Hippos? Rivers wide enough to feed them? These images force you to reckon with a world that no longer exists. They are evidence, carved in defiance of forgetting, that the Sahara was once paradise. And yet the desert presses in. The wind claws at the cliffs, the sand erodes the edges. Many carvings are faint now, nearly erased. Some lie half buried, others lost to collapse. The Sahara consumes even as it preserves, a cruel balance. For every giraffe we can still see, there may be 10 more lost beneath dunes, waiting for chance, or for us, to uncover them. So let us linger a moment longer. Picture yourself tracing a fingertip across the groove of a line carved 5,000 years ago. The stone is hot, but the line is cool, sheltered from the sun. For that moment, you are connected, not just to the animal depicted, not just to the land that has changed, but to the human hand that carved it. A hand that, for a brief moment in eternity, pressed chisel against stone, certain of its own existence. And now, across millennia, you share that certainty. The desert exhales again, wind sweeping sand across the valley floor, erasing tracks, covering stones. It is a reminder that everything we have seen, the giraffes, the hunters, the dancers, could vanish again beneath the dunes. But they are still here, for now, speaking softly in images, telling us of rivers, of abundance, of lives too often forgotten. And as we turn away, walking deeper into the Sahara, the rock art lingers in our minds. It is not just history. It is not just archaeology. It is proof that the desert was never empty, that its silence is deceptive, that its sands conceal 1,000 voices etched in stone. Ahead lies the vast hollow of a vanished sea, Lake Megachad, its memory still shimmering in the horizon's heat. And so, step by step, guided by the art of the ancients, we walk onward into the desert's next secret. The desert opens up again, wide and hollow, as if it has been holding its breath for thousands of years. The wind softens, and the horizon trembles in the heat. For a fleeting second, you might almost mistake it for water. A mirage, you think. The kind of cruel trick the Sahara plays on weary travelers, shimmering lakes that vanish as soon as you approach. But not all lakes here were illusions. Once, there was a body of water so vast that it dwarfed imagination, a lake that stretched further than the eye could follow, swallowing whole horizons. This was Lake Megachad. Close your eyes and let the dunes collapse, let the dust settle, let time rewind. The air thickens with humidity, the ground softens into fertile mud. Before you, spreading out across the heart of Africa, lies a lake that could have swallowed modern nations. At its fullest, it covered an area larger than all of Germany. Nearly 150,000 square miles of shimmering blue, stretching across what is now Chad, Niger, Nigeria, and Cameroon. Imagine standing on its shore. The waves lap against reed beds that sway like green curtains, fish flash in the shallows, and crocodiles bask on muddy banks. The water is alive with motion, a mirror for the sky. And around this giant, people lived. Villages clung to its edges, fishers cast nets woven from reeds, children waded in shallow water, splashing under the watchful eyes of hippos. Herds of cattle grazed on the lush grass that spread outward from its fertile shores, and farmers tilled the soil, planting grains in land that was generous and green. Life here must have felt abundant, almost unending. But abundance has its own rhythms. and Lake Megachad was a restless giant. It expanded and shrank with the swings of climate. During the African humid period, about 7,000 years ago, it was enormous, one of the largest lakes Earth has ever known. But then, slowly, as rains faltered and the monsoons retreated, the waters began to pull back. At first, perhaps imperceptibly, shorelines retreating by a few steps, fishing grounds shrinking just a little. Then more dramatically, villages that once sat by the water found themselves stranded miles inland, their canoes left useless on cracked earth. Even today, what remains of Lake Megachad is a fragment called Lake Chad, a pale shadow of its former self. Modern maps show it dwindling, year after year, to a fraction of its past size. But beneath the desert sand, the outlines of its greatness remain. Ancient shorelines, invisible from the ground, appear from the air like rings on a tree, bands etched into the earth, proof of waters long gone. Imagine standing in the middle of the Sahara and finding seashells. Not fossils from millions of years ago, but shells from a lake that dried only a few thousand years past. Imagine digging into sand and uncovering the bones of fish, the skeleton of a crocodile, the delicate trace of a water plant. These are not fragments of fantasy. They are evidence. The desert has been a sea more times than we can count, and Lake Megachad was its greatest illusion made real. The people who lived around its edges must have felt the lake was eternal. They painted fish in their rock art, carved boats into stone, and made pottery decorated with water animals. Their lives revolved around the rhythm of its floods, the bounty of its waters. But slowly, inexorably, the desert pressed in. Crops failed. Fishing grounds dried. Families packed what they could and moved in search of rivers that still flowed, valleys that still held green. Migration carved new paths southward and eastward, seeding cultures that would shape Africa for millennia. Picture yourself walking along one of those vanished shores. The sand crunches underfoot, but if you look closely, you see tiny white shells scattered across the ground, brittle but undeniable. You pick one up and hold it in your palm. Once, this shell was part of a thriving lake bed. Once, it held a living creature. Now it lies in your hand, a relic of a drowned memory. How many such shells lie buried beneath the dunes, waiting for another curious hand to uncover them? The lake was not just water. It was a connector. Think of the rivers that fed it, tributaries that drew water from vast regions, pulling life into its basin. Along those rivers, trade and stories flowed. Communities met and mingled. Ideas were exchanged. To live near Lake Megachad was to live in the center of a network of life. And when it dried, it wasn't only landscapes that shifted, it was cultures, languages, and identities. The shrinking of water reshaped human destiny. Today, scientists use satellites to trace its ghost. From above, you can see the scars of its shorelines etched like wrinkles on the Earth's face. You can see the dry basins where rivers once emptied their loads of silt. You can even see patches where underground water still lingers, trapped aquifers that remember the lake long after its surface vanished. Nomads today draw from those hidden wells, drinking from the memory of a giant that once spread across the Sahara. But for all its immensity, Lake Megachad was fragile. A shift in rains, a slow tilt in Earth's orbit, and the giant withered. It is humbling, isn't it? To realize that something so vast, so seemingly permanent, could vanish into dust in only a few thousand years. And yet this is the truth of the desert: permanence is an illusion. The dunes shift. The rivers dry. Even lakes the size of seas fade into memory. Now picture the lake at dusk. The sky burns gold and violet, the water mirrors every hue. Fishermen return with their catches, their boats heavy with tilapia and perch. Fires crackle along the shore as families prepare meals, the scent of smoke and roasted fish drifting into the air. Children run along the shallows, their laughter echoing across the water. You close your eyes, and you can almost hear it still, the life that once pulsed around this vanished giant. And then you open your eyes, and there is only sand. The wind howls across emptiness. The shoreline is gone. The lake is gone. But its ghosts remain. The Sahara carries many silences, but the silence of Lake Megachad is perhaps the loudest. It reminds us that what we see is only a moment, that landscapes are not fixed, that even the greatest waters can become dust. And so we walk on, leaving the memory of waves behind, heading deeper into the desert's heart. Ahead lies another secret, another echo of civilization, the Garamantes, a people who carved life out of dryness itself, sustained not by lakes, but by water hidden deep beneath the sand. The wind sighs low across the basin where Megachad once glittered, and the silence that follows feels like a closing door. The lake is gone, the waves forgotten, but the story does not end there. People are stubborn. They do not simply vanish when water retreats. They adapt, they claw survival out of impossible soil, they build where no one believes building is possible. And so, in the very heart of the Sahara, as the green world withered, a new people rose. The Garamantes. Imagine walking now across a plain where the dunes ripple like frozen waves, each crest shining under a merciless sun. The air burns in your throat, the horizon wavers, and you think, no one could live here. But then you see it, a trace of walls, a scatter of stones that once formed houses, fragments of pottery glinting half-buried in the sand. Look closer, and you realize, this was once a city. Not a caravan stop, not a village clinging to an oasis, but a true city, with streets and walls and courtyards. Against all odds, people thrived here. The Garamantes built their world in what is today southern Libya, in the Fezzan region, a place so parched it seems more suited for silence than civilization. And yet, from roughly 500 BC to 500 CE, they carved a kingdom out of the desert. They were not just survivors. They were inventors, traders, builders of roads, and masters of water. The Roman world knew of them. Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BC, described them as a great people who hunted the Ethiopian troglodytes with 4-horse chariots. To the Greeks and Romans, they were both mysterious and formidable, desert lords whose ways seemed alien, whose land was both unreachable and hostile. But here is the marvel. The Garamantes did not simply endure the desert, they bent it to their will. Hidden beneath the dunes lies the secret to their survival, the fogaras. Underground channels, miles long, hand-dug with stone tools, tapping fossil water trapped deep in the earth since wetter ages. Imagine the labor, shafts cut down through blistering rock, tunnels carved sideways to catch ancient aquifers, water coaxed gently to flow downhill into fields. With these underground veins, the Garamantes watered orchards of dates, fields of barley and wheat, gardens that bloomed in the middle of desolation. Stand with me on the edge of one of their lost fields. The soil here looks dry now, cracked and lifeless. But close your eyes and picture it 2,000 years ago. Furrows run green with crops. Date palms rise like watchtowers above. The air hums with insects. You can hear the murmur of water as it trickles from the hidden fogera into irrigation channels, feeding rows of grain. A farmer bends to the soil, his hands moving rhythmically, planting seed. A child runs past carrying a clay jar of cool water, drawn from underground tunnels that his ancestors carved long before he was born. Life, ordered and sustained, where today there is nothing but heat. Their cities were not grand marble metropolises like Rome, but they were cities nonetheless. Garama, their capital, held perhaps 4,000 souls, with tens of thousands more scattered across surrounding settlements. Imagine its streets, narrow alleys winding between mud brick houses, workshops ringing with the clatter of metal and stone, courtyards shaded with palm fronds. Traders arrive, their camels laden with salt, gold, and perhaps slaves. In the marketplace, voices mingle, bargaining over goods carried across impossible distances. For the Garamantes were not isolated. They sat at crossroads. To their north lay the Mediterranean world, Carthage, Rome, the ports of Tripolitania. To their south stretched the vast reaches of the Sahel and beyond, where gold, ivory, and enslaved peoples could be obtained. The Garamantes made themselves middlemen of this exchange. Caravans stopped in their cities, drank from their wells, bartered, and moved on. Wealth flowed, and with it, influence. But they were also feared. The Romans called them raiders, desert warriors who struck from the sands with terrifying speed. Imagine a Roman garrison on the frontier, stationed in the sweltering heat of North Africa. The soldiers peer across the dunes, uneasy. And then, dust on the horizon. A line of horse-drawn chariots, wheels spinning, sun flashing on weapons. The Garamantes descend, swift and merciless, vanishing back into the desert before the Romans can rally. To the empire, they were barbarians. To themselves, they were defenders of their realm, takers of what the desert owed them. Archaeology has uncovered their cemeteries, thousands of graves scattered across the desert. Stand among them in your mind, stone markers rising from the sand, silent witnesses to centuries of life. The bones tell their stories. Some show signs of disease, of hardship, of the brutal cost of desert life. Others carry marks of wealth, jewelry, fine pottery, ornaments that speak of distant trade. Among them are children, elders, warriors, farmers, all who fought to wring life from a land determined to erase them. And yet, even the Garamantes could not outlast the desert forever. Fossil water does not renew. Once drained, it is gone. Slowly, as centuries passed, their fogger is dried. Fields turned barren. Cities shrank. By the late first millennium, the Garamantes were gone, absorbed into other cultures, erased by time. The desert had won again. But traces remain. Walk with me through the ruins of Garama. Walls crumble but still stand shoulder high, defiant against centuries of sandstorms. You can trace the outlines of streets, of houses, of courtyards where families once sat at dusk, sharing meals as the desert cooled. You can stand in the mouth of a fog-era shaft, staring down into darkness, imagining the hands that dug it, the lives it sustained. You can feel the weight of a civilization that dared to bloom in a place designed for silence. And isn't that the haunting truth of the Sahara? That beneath its emptiness lie entire worlds like this, cities, farms, trade routes, dreams, buried and forgotten. The Garamantes were once a power to rival their neighbors. Today, their name is barely remembered, their ruins swallowed by dunes. But when you walk here, when you brush sand from a shard of pottery or step into the shadow of their walls, the desert whispers back their story. We were here. We lived. We thrived. Do not forget us. The sun dips lower, painting the dunes in blood-red light. Ahead, the sand stretches endlessly. But somewhere beneath it, water still sleeps, waiting in stone veins dug by vanished hands. And beyond, in the distance, other ruins wait, phantom cities swallowed whole, their names erased. The desert beckons us onward, deeper into its library of silence. The desert draws us onward, away from the ruins of Garama, away from the broken walls and scattered pottery of a vanished kingdom. The sun presses down, the dunes roll like waves turned to stone, and silence wraps around us again. But beneath this silence lies the true secret of the Garamantes, their genius, their defiance, their lifeline. For though the cities have crumbled and the fields have turned to dust, their greatest creation still slumbers underground. The foggeras. Imagine standing before a small hole in the desert floor. At first, it seems nothing, just a shallow depression ringed by stones, perhaps the mouth of some animal burrow. But step closer, peer into the darkness, and you see the impossible, a shaft plunging down into shadow, cut by human hands thousands of years ago. This is no accident. It is one of hundreds, thousands, spread across the Fezon Basin. Each shaft connects to a tunnel, narrow, hand-carved, stretching for miles beneath the desert. Together they form a hidden web, an underground river brought to the surface by patience and brilliance. Picture the work it took. Men lowered on ropes, chiseling with stone tools, carving through hard rock and stifling heat. Shafts dug at intervals so air could circulate, so spoil could be hauled to the surface. From each shaft, a tunnel dug horizontally, inch by inch, to catch the fossil water trapped in ancient aquifers. No pumps, no modern machines. Only human endurance, generation after generation, carving darkness into lifelines. Walk with me through one of these tunnels in your mind. The ceiling is low, you must stoop to pass. The air is damp, cooler than the burning desert above. The walls glisten faintly, carved smooth by hands long gone. You hear the faint trickle of water, the softest of sounds more precious than gold. Follow it, and you find a channel cut with precision, sloping gently downhill, carrying the water toward the surface. When it emerges, it feeds an orchard of palms, their fronds rattling in the desert wind. It fills a cistern, where women gather with clay jars. It spills into fields where barley bends under the sun. Life conjured from stone. These fagaras, some call them kanats in Persia, kataras in Morocco, are the veins of forgotten landscapes. To build them required not only labor but vision, a belief that the desert could be tamed. The Garamantes dug thousands of kilometers of tunnels, some reaching over 30 miles. It was an engineering feat to rival the aqueducts of Rome, but hidden, humble, carried out in silence under the sand. Think of the lives tied to these tunnels. Farmers rising at dawn, walking narrow channels to divert water into their fields. Children learning the sound of flowing water as a lullaby. Entire towns built on the certainty that, beneath their feet, the earth itself carried a secret river. To the Garamantes, the fagaras were not only infrastructure. They were survival, identity, hope. And yet they carried a shadow. For the water they drew was fossil water, ancient reserves laid down in wetter ages, sealed underground, unreplenished by modern rains. Every drop pulled to the surface was a gift, but a gift that would one day run out. The Garamantes may not have fully known it, but their lifeline was finite. Still, for centuries it worked. Their fields flourished. Their cities thrived. They built a kingdom in defiance of the desert. And when outsiders came, the Romans, the traders, the enemies, they marveled at how such life could exist here. To Rome, the Garamantes were raiders, shadows on chariots. But to themselves, they were keepers of water, masters of hidden rivers. Imagine being a Roman envoy, traveling south into the Sahara, expecting nothing but sand and death. Days pass, the heat grows unbearable, and then suddenly, a valley of green. Fields of grain, palm groves heavy with fruit, canals glimmering in the sun. At first, it must have felt like sorcery. But the magic was stone and sweat, fagaras dug by hands you never saw. Archaeologists today trace the lines of these fagaras from above, mapping the desert like veins under skin. Many shafts still gape open, dark mouths staring into earth. Some tunnels still carry traces of moisture. Others have collapsed, buried under centuries of shifting sand. But together, they form one of the greatest hydraulic systems ever built. Step closer. Imagine lowering yourself into one of those shafts, gripping a rope, feet pressed against the wall. The air grows cooler as you descend, the light fades, and then you are in darkness. The tunnel stretches before you, narrow, low, endless. You crouch, you crawl, you follow the faint glimmer of wet stone. Somewhere ahead, water waits. You realize you are in the lungs of a vanished civilization, breathing the same damp air its diggers once breathed, hearing the same drip of water that sustained their lives. Above ground, life depended on what these tunnels delivered. Crops were planted according to their flow. Cities rose where fagaras could be maintained. Trade routes bent toward the wells that they fed. The Garamantes mapped their world not by rivers above, but by rivers below, invisible but essential. And when those rivers failed, so too did their kingdom. Slowly, inexorably, the fagaras ran dry. Perhaps they noticed first in the fields. The barley thinner, the dates fewer, the soil cracking where once it had glistened with irrigation. Perhaps they dug deeper, desperate, carving new shafts in search of water that was no longer there. But fossil water does not return. When it is gone forever. So the cities emptied. The orchards withered. The forests collapsed in silence. The desert reclaimed its own. Today, when you stand at the edge of one of those ruined shafts, you feel not only awe but melancholy. For here is the story of human brilliance and human fragility, carved into stone, swallowed by sand. The desert holds many secrets, but few as haunting as these hidden aqueducts. They are the veins of a kingdom that refused to accept death, that fought for centuries against desolation, and for a time, won. Walk away, and the wind fills the shafts with its sighing voice, as though the desert itself is remembering. Ahead, the sands stretch once more. But if you listen closely, you might hear another sound, faint and distant, the ring of caravan bells. For long after the Garamantes faded, others came to cross the Sahara, not to farm it, but to turn it into a highway of trade. Salt, gold, slaves, stories, all moved along its endless roads. The foggers fed the fields, but the caravans fed empires. And so, step by step, we follow their echo into the next chapter of the desert's memory. The wind rises again, brushing sand across the mouths of the old foggers as if to seal them forever. We leave them behind, those buried arteries of a vanished kingdom, and follow the pull of the horizon. The sun hangs like a hammered disk of bronze, heat quivering in waves. For hours, perhaps days, there is nothing but silence. But then, faint at first, you hear it, the distant clink of metal, the soft jingle of bells. It comes closer, clearer, the sound of a caravan. Picture it. A line of camels stretches across the dunes, each beast swaying with the slow, deliberate rhythm of the desert. Bells swing from their necks, ringing softly, steady as a heartbeat. Their shadows crawl long across the sand. Atop them, men sit wrapped in indigo-dyed cloth, their faces hidden, their eyes gleaming in the glare of the sun. Behind them trail more camels, loaded with burdens of salt, ivory, gold, and too often, human lives. This is the sound of commerce in the Sahara. This is the lifeblood of empires. The desert may seem empty, but for more than 1,000 years it was a highway, the great artery linking North Africa with the kingdoms of the Sahel and beyond. Picture it at night, under the cold stars, the line of camels moves by torchlight, their footsteps muffled in sand. The desert becomes a stage for whispers, for bargaining, for the rustle of cloth as traders adjust their loads. To walk here was to walk the boundary between survival and fortune. What goods did they carry? Salt, most of all. Imagine it stacked in slabs, white blocks cut from the mines of Tordeni, lashed to camels' backs. Heavy, unyielding, yet more valuable than gold. To the kingdoms south of the Sahara, salt was life, preserving food, replenishing bodies drained by heat. In exchange, the caravans carried north what the Sahel and forest kingdoms offered: ivory, kola nuts, gold dust gathered from rivers, and slaves, thousands upon thousands, bound in chains, forced across the dunes in brutal marches. Each step was agony, each mile a test. Many never reached the end. But not all was suffering. Along these routes, towns bloomed like flowers at the edge of a well. Oases became hubs of wealth and culture. Timbuktu, Gadams, Agadez, Gao, names that echo still with the weight of legend. Imagine approaching one of these towns after weeks in the dunes. Your lips are cracked, your skin burned, your water nearly gone. Then, suddenly, you see it, a smear of green on the horizon, palm trees clustered around water, mud brick walls rising like a mirage made real. The air is rich with the smell of dates and smoke, the murmur of voices, the laughter of children. The caravan pours into the gates, and trade begins. Step into the market of Timbuktu in its prime. The air buzzes with languages: Arabic, Berber, Songhai, Hausa, Mandinka. Merchants display their wares: bolts of cloth dyed brilliant blue, gold dust gleaming in tiny gourds, manuscripts inked with flowing script. Camels kneel in the dust, groaning under their loads. A scholar debates theology with a traveler from Cairo. A blacksmith hammers at iron tools while children chase each other between stalls. This is not an empty desert, it is a crossroads of worlds. The journey itself was ritual. Caravans moved with discipline, each camel tethered nose to tail. At dawn, the animals were loaded, their burdens adjusted with careful knots. By day they walked in silence, heat pressing down like a hand. By evening the caravan stopped. Fires were lit, tea brewed strong and sweet, stories told under the vast stars. Imagine lying on your back after such a day, the sand cooling beneath you, the Milky Way stretching so clear it feels like a river of light. Exhaustion seeps into your bones, but so does wonder. Here, in the vastness, you feel both infinitely small and part of something larger, the eternal rhythm of the desert. Of course, the desert was not gentle. Sandstorms could swallow caravans whole, burying men and camels in minutes. Thieves prowled the routes, ready to strike at isolated groups. Water was always scarce, and wells could run dry without warning. Each journey was a gamble. A single mistake, a missed oasis, could doom hundreds. And yet, the trade endured because the profits outweighed the risks. Gold from West Africa traveled north, eventually minted into coins that filled the treasuries of Europe. Books, knowledge, and religion traveled south, carried in the hands of scholars and clerics. The desert was harsh, but it was also a bridge. Pause a moment, and picture a lone traveler separated from the caravan. The dunes stretch endless in all directions, the sun unrelenting. His camel collapses, burden too heavy. He stumbles on, lips cracked, tongue swollen, eyes blurred by heat. In the distance, the horizon shimmers with the cruel trick of water that isn't there. Many perish this way, their bones whitening in the sand, silent markers for those who came after. To cross the Sahara was to court death, and yet thousands did it every year. And what of the stories that traveled with them? Songs sung around fires, legends whispered at oases, news carried across continents. Imagine hearing in Timbuktu of wars in distant Spain, or a Roman coin turning up in the Sahel centuries after the empire's fall. The desert was not a barrier but a transmitter, carrying ideas as well as goods. Islam spread this way, its prayers whispered under Saharan stars, carried south by traders who paused to kneel in the sand. The desert holds no monuments to this traffic. The caravans left little behind but faint trails and scattered bones. Yet their memory lingers in the towns they fed, in the wealth they created, in the cultures they connected. The Sahara may seem endless and barren, but once it was alive with the creak of leather straps, the sigh of camels, the murmur of markets. And so we walk on, the echo of caravan bells fading behind us. Ahead lies something stranger still, not cities of trade, not fields fed by fogaras, but settlements that rose and then vanished without a trace. Phantom cities swallowed whole by the shifting dunes. Their names lost, their stories buried, their lives reduced to fragments of pottery left behind. The desert keeps its secrets, but it leaves hints, enough to make us wonder who lived there, and why the sands took them. The bells of the caravan fade into memory, their rhythm dissolving into the endless hush of the dunes. The desert swallows sound quickly, as though jealous of any voice but its own. We walk on, the sand shifting underfoot, the horizon shimmering with heat. For hours there is nothing, just sky, just sand, just silence. And then, all at once, the emptiness feels wrong. You sense it before you see it. A scatter of stone, the faint outline of walls, the suggestion of streets half buried in the dunes. A city. Or rather, the ghost of one. The Sahara holds many such ghosts. Settlements that rose with hope and labor, only to vanish without trace. Some were oases that dried. Some were trade stations abandoned when routes shifted. Others may have been lost to storms so sudden and merciless that entire populations disappeared overnight. Their names are forgotten, their histories erased. What remains are fragments, shards of pottery, outlines of foundations, a wall protruding from sand like the bone of a buried giant. Imagine standing in one of these phantom cities at dusk. The sand is warm beneath your boots, the wind sighs low, and the ruins glow gold in the fading light. You climb a low dune and look down, there, the faint grid of streets. Once, families lived here. Children played in these alleys. Fires burned in these hearths. Merchants weighed goods in these courtyards. Now there is nothing but silence. The air feels thick, haunted, as if the city still breathes just below the sand. Archaeologists stumble upon such places by accident. A sandstorm shifts, and a wall appears. A dune collapses, and a scatter of pottery surfaces. Each discovery hints at life. In one place, fragments of Roman amphorae, carried across the desert in trade. In another, the remains of date pits, evidence of orchards long dead. A few stone tombs, still standing stubborn against the dunes, mark the presence of people who once believed their city permanent. But the desert allows no permanence. Close your eyes, and picture one of these cities alive again. The morning sun rising over mud brick walls. The market buzzing with voices, camels groaning as they kneel to be unloaded. Women carrying jars from the well, children splashing in the dust. A traveler arrives, exhausted from the dunes, and is greeted with water and shelter. For a time, life here must have felt secure, almost eternal. And yet we know how it ends. The well runs dry, the trade route shifts, or a storm buries everything. The city empties. Sand drifts in. Roofs collapse. Generations vanish. The desert's cruelty is matched only by its patience. It doesn't topple walls in rage. It buries them gently, grain by grain, until memory itself is smothered. That is why these cities feel so strange when you find them. They are not ruined like castles struck by war or temples burned by invaders. They are simply gone. As if the earth decided to reclaim them without violence, only silence. Some whisper legends about these phantom cities. Tales of cursed settlements swallowed overnight, of entire caravans lured into false oases that turned out to be traps of shifting sand. In medieval Arab geographies, you find mentions of cities that no longer exist, names without places, maps dotted with phantom walls. To travelers, the Sahara was alive with rumor, the promise of hidden kingdoms, the fear of vanished towns. Were they real? Many still lie undiscovered, waiting under dunes that shift like tides. Imagine walking with a Tuareg guide across this desert centuries ago. He points toward the horizon and tells you, "There, once, a city stood. My grandfather's grandfather said its wells were deep, its palms thick with fruit. But the sand came, and now there is nothing. You squint, but see only emptiness. Yet you know he is right. Somewhere beneath your feet, under 100 feet of silence, lies the city's bones. There is a melancholy beauty to this. For each phantom city is not only a ruin, but a reminder of impermanence. They warn us that even what feels solid, walls, streets, homes, can vanish as easily as footprints in sand. They are monuments not of power, but of fragility. Picture yourself entering one now, half exposed after a storm. You duck into a room where the walls still stand shoulder high. The floor is sand, but your hands brush stone once plastered smooth. A broken jar lies in a corner. On the wall, faint traces of paint, a geometric pattern, faded but not erased. For a heartbeat, you feel the room alive again, a woman kneeling at the hearth, a child laughing, the smell of bread baking. Then the wind gusts, sand pours in, and the illusion dies. How many such cities lie hidden still? Some say hundreds, others thousands. Each storm uncovers a fragment, then buries another. The desert keeps its secrets, showing just enough to remind us of what it has taken. And so we stand in this phantom city, listening to its silence. The sun sinks, the stars emerge, and the ruins seem to glow under moonlight, like bones under pale skin. You feel both awe and unease. For if whole cities can vanish here, swallowed without a trace, what hope do smaller lives have of being remembered? Yet perhaps that is why people carved rock art, why they built fagaras, why they traded across impossible distances. They knew the desert erases, and they fought to leave something that endured. The wind rises again, carrying fine sand that stings your skin. The ruins begin to blur, their outlines dissolving. By morning, this city may be gone again, swallowed until another storm reveals it. We turn away, the phantom city fading behind us, and walk deeper into the Sahara. Ahead lies not ruins but rumor, the great legend that has haunted the desert for centuries. The tale of a lost world far older than any Garamantian city, far grander than any caravan town. Some say it lies beneath the sands even now. Atlantis. The dunes whisper behind us, the phantom city fading into silence as though it had never been there at all. The desert closes its mouth quickly, covering its secrets with sand. We walk on, and the emptiness deepens. The stars wheel overhead, sharp and countless, the kind of sky that makes you feel the world itself is older than you can fathom. And in this vastness, legends stir, legends not just of lost towns or forgotten wells, but of entire worlds swallowed whole. Atlantis. The very name shimmers like a mirage, half history, half dream. Plato first told the tale, nearly 2,400 years ago, an island empire of unimaginable wealth, its people proud and ambitious, its cities shining with palaces and harbors, its fields abundant, its kings descended from gods. Then, destruction. A single day and night of floods and earthquakes, and Atlantis was gone. Swallowed by the sea. For centuries, scholars have debated whether Plato meant allegory or memory. Was it a moral story about hubris, or a faint echo of something real? Now imagine standing in the Sahara, the sand cool at night beneath your feet, the constellations sharp above you. Here, too, people whisper of Atlantis. Some believe its bones lie beneath these very dunes, not beneath an ocean. Could the Sahara, once green and fertile, once home to rivers and lakes, have been the stage for Plato's drowned empire? Walk with me in the mind's eye. You climb a dune at dawn, and from its crest, the desert rolls outward in rippling circles. Some see in this landscape the pattern Plato described, concentric rings of land and water, the structure of Atlantis's great capital. In the region of Mauritania, the Rikhat structure, the eye of the Sahara, looms vast, a circle 25 miles wide etched into stone. From above, it looks uncannily like the diagram Plato gave, rings upon rings, land and sea alternating, once vibrant, now dry. Coincidence? Perhaps. But in the silence of the desert, it is easy to believe otherwise. Picture Atlantis not as a city of the sea, but as a city of the Sahara before the sands. The climate wetter, the rivers flowing, the land green. Imagine broad fields of grain stretching outward from a ringed capital. Harbors filled not with ships of the ocean but with vessels of great lakes, like Mega-Chad. Temples gleaming white against blue water, statues of gods rising from courtyards, marketplaces alive with voices. This was a place of abundance, wealth, and pride. And then, when the rains faltered, when the land dried, when earthquakes or floods struck, destruction. A civilization undone, its memory fading until only Plato carried the echo. Of course, scholars doubt. They argue Plato's Atlantis was fiction, a metaphor for greed and collapse. They say the eye of the Sahara is geology, not archaeology. And yet, every ruin we have passed in this desert was once dismissed as myth. The Garamantes were once a rumor, now their fagaras stretched beneath our feet. Phantom cities were dismissed as mirages, now pottery gleams under sand. Perhaps Atlantis, too, waits for discovery, hidden not in the ocean's depths but in the Sahara's silence. Consider the legends that ripple outward. Medieval Arab geographers spoke of cities buried in the sands, of white walls gleaming beneath dunes. Tuareg storytellers still speak of Zerzura, the city of birds, a place of great wealth hidden in the desert, guarded by jinn. European explorers of the 19th century chased these tales, convinced they would find a lost kingdom in the Sahara. Some returned empty-handed. Others never returned at all. But the stories endured. Imagine wandering here 1,000 years ago, guided by whispers. You crest a dune, and think you see walls shining in the distance. You hurry, the sand burning your feet, but as you draw near, the vision vanishes. Was it a mirage, or the desert revealing Atlantis for a heartbeat before hiding it again? Legends feed on silence. The Sahara gives them plenty. Its vastness swallows certainty, leaving room for imagination. And Atlantis thrives in that gap, suspended between what we know and what we long to believe. Pause with me now. Sit on this dune. The sand is cool, the stars bright. Let yourself dream. What if Atlantis was not an island, but a continent's heartland? What if its people were the ancestors of those who carved giraffes into rock, who dug foggers beneath the sand, who traded salt and gold across the desert? What if Plato's drowned world was, in truth, the Sahara's forgotten paradise? And even if it was not, does it matter? Atlantis is more than a place. It is an idea, that great civilizations can fall, that wealth can vanish, that even the most powerful can be erased. The Sahara itself proves this, even without Atlantis. The Garamantes, the phantom cities, the vanished rivers, each is a reminder that nothing is eternal. The wind stirs again, tugging at your clothes, whispering through the dunes. The stars wheel slowly westward. Atlantis drifts back into legend, the desert closing around it. Ahead lies another kind of mystery, less myth than history, the Carthaginians, bold sailors of the Mediterranean, who may have left their footprints deep in the Sahara. The desert waits, and we rise to follow. The desert exhales, and Atlantis fades like a mirage, half memory, half dream. We walk on, the sand shifting beneath our feet, the stars dimming as dawn presses pale light across the horizon. Ahead lies history not born from legend, but from empire. Not the whispered paradise of philosophers, but the hard footsteps of sailors, merchants, and soldiers who dared to push beyond the familiar sea and into the silent heart of the Sahara. These were the Carthaginians, the heirs of Phoenicia, masters of trade, their ships spiderwebbing across the Mediterranean. And though their cities thrived on the coast, their influence reached far beyond, leaving traces deep in the desert. Close your eyes and picture Carthage in its prime. White walls gleam against the sapphire sea. Harbors bustle with ships, sails taut with wind, their hulls heavy with goods. From every corner of the Mediterranean world, traders converge, wine from Greece, silver from Iberia, tin from Britain, ivory from Africa. Carthage was not merely a city, it was a nerve center, a marketplace of continents. But Carthaginians were not content with coastlines. Their hunger for trade pulled them inland, into the desert's harsh embrace. Imagine a caravan departing from Carthage. The air is salt-scented, the cries of gulls echo overhead, but soon the sea vanishes behind them. They march south, leaving fertile fields and olive groves, entering landscapes that grow harsher with every step. Valleys of stone, plains of dust, dunes rising like mountains. Camels sway under burdens of goods, amphorae of wine, cloth, tools, weapons, all bound for the unknown. The Carthaginians had no illusions about the Sahara's dangers, yet they pressed forward. Why? Because the desert promised wealth. Gold. Always gold. To the south, beyond the Sahara, rivers glittered with it. Empires rose upon it. The Carthaginians wanted their share. And so they sent traders into the dunes, forging alliances with desert tribes, learning the oases, marking the routes. They traded wine for salt, weapons for ivory, fine cloth for enslaved lives. Slowly, step by step, the Carthaginian footprint pressed deeper into the sands. Archaeology hints at this presence. Fragments of Carthaginian pottery have been found far inland, carried by trade or tribute. Ancient accounts speak of caravans moving south, guided by desert peoples who knew the wells and stars. Some suggest the Garamantes themselves were allies, middlemen carrying goods from one world to another. Imagine the meeting: a Carthaginian merchant, robed and weary from travel, sitting in the shade of a palm beside a Garamantian chief. Between them, goods spread out: amber beads, copper tools, slabs of salt, jars of oil. Hands gesture, voices rise and fall. A bargain struck, the goods exchanged. In this way, empires touched across emptiness. But trade was not the only reason Carthage reached inward. There were whispers of exploration, journeys beyond the horizon, into lands unknown. The most famous of these is the story of Hanno the Navigator. Though his voyage skirted the Atlantic coast of Africa, some believe expeditions like his also sought inland routes, tying coastal Carthage to Saharan corridors. Could Carthaginian eyes have gazed upon the dunes of Fezzan, the valleys of Tassili, the shores of Lake Megachad in its shrinking days? The evidence is faint, but the possibility lingers, like a half-buried shard of amphora in the sand. Imagine being one of those traders. The sun is merciless, your lips are cracked, your tongue swollen. Each day, the horizon never changes. You march, your sandals filling with grit, your body aching. At night you lie under stars, hearing the low groans of camels, the murmurs of men. You dream of Carthage's harbors, of the sea wind, of cool stone houses. And yet, when dawn comes you rise again. For the desert may strip you bare, but the promise of gold, ivory, and slaves pulls you onward. The Carthaginian footprint is not always literal. Sometimes it is cultural, an echo that lingers in the practices of desert tribes. Roman writers mention that Carthaginians allied with peoples of the Sahara, teaching them methods of trade, supplying them with tools. In return, the desert tribes opened their wells, guided caravans, revealed the secret paths across shifting sands. It was a pact of necessity. Carthage needed guides, and the tribes welcomed goods that bound them to the Mediterranean world. But history is cruel to Carthage. Rome's wars with the city ended in fire and salt, its libraries burned, its stories scattered. What Carthaginians may have written about their ventures into the Sahara is lost. We are left only with traces, pottery, coins, fragments of rumor, and the testimony of their enemies. The Romans called them greedy, ruthless, obsessed with wealth. Perhaps they were. But standing here in the desert, it is hard not to feel admiration for their audacity. To push so far from the safety of their harbors, to gamble with survival for the chance of fortune, this was courage, or desperation, or both. Picture now a caravan reaching the edge of the Sahel after weeks of hardship. Before them spreads green, grasses waving, trees thick with shade, rivers glimmering. Gold dust gleams in wooden bowls, ivory tusks pile high, human captives sit in chains. The Carthaginians have arrived. Their goods are exchanged, their coffers filled. And then they turn back, vanishing once more into the desert, carrying wealth northward to feed the hunger of their city. For centuries, this pattern repeated. Step by step, the Carthaginian footprint pressed deeper, though always faintly, always precariously. And when Rome destroyed Carthage, the desert swallowed its trails. The oases remained, the trade endured, but the names changed. New empires rose to claim the roads the Carthaginians once walked. Yet somewhere beneath these dunes, perhaps, lie shards of their passage, broken amphorae, rusted tools, coins lost from a merchant's pouch. Proof that they too walked here, that even the lords of the sea sought to tame the silence of the Sahara. The wind shifts again, sweeping across the dunes, erasing our footprints as quickly as they are made. Behind us, Carthage fades, just as Atlantis did, just as the Garamantes did. Ahead, the horizon darkens, not with myth or rumor, but with power. For on the southern edges of the desert rose kingdoms vast and formidable, Kush, Kanem-Bornu, empires whose wealth and armies reshaped the fate of the Sahara itself. The desert beckons, and we walk on. The Carthaginian shadows fade into the dunes, their amphorae and coins swallowed by sand, their voices silenced by Rome's fire. But the Sahara does not end with their footsteps. For while traders from the north press downward, empires to the south look northward, their power swelling at the desert's edge. Here, where the grasslands blur into dust, kingdoms rose whose wealth and armies commanded respect across continents. The desert may have seemed a barrier, but to them it was also a stage, a wall against enemies, and a bridge for trade. These were the great kingdoms of the south, Kush, Kanem-Bornu, Ghana, Mali, Songhai, realms whose names echo like thunder beyond the dunes. Imagine walking now from the barren Sahara into the Sahel. The change is slow at first, thorny shrubs, patches of grass, the scent of earth after rain. Then suddenly, rivers appear, their waters wide and glimmering, their banks crowded with life. Herds of cattle graze, fishermen cast nets, farmers bend over fields of millet. Palm groves sway in the heat. This is a frontier not of emptiness, but of abundance. And here, civilizations flourished. Let us begin with Kush, the kingdom of the Nile's southern reaches. Long before the Roman Empire dreamed of Africa, Kushite kings built cities of stone at Napata and Meroe, their pyramids smaller but more numerous than those of Egypt, their armies feared across deserts and rivers alike. Imagine standing in Meroe as its forges roar. Iron smokes the air, tools and weapons hammered out in endless supply. The desert here is not emptiness but resource, its people skilled at bending it to their will. Caravans flowed from Kush northward, carrying ivory, gold, and slaves. In return came fine cloth, glass, and ideas. But Kush was only the beginning. As centuries turned and the climate shifted, power gathered further west. On the edges of Lake Chad, in the heart of the Sahel, the Kanem-Bornu Empire rose. Picture a caravan winding south across the desert, arriving at Njimi, Kanem's capital. The city hums with life, markets filled with salt from the Sahara, horses brought from the north, slaves captured in war. From the 9th to the 19th century, Kanem-Bornu endured, its kings commanding respect across the desert's corridors. Imagine their cavalry, horsemen clad in armor, lances gleaming, the thunder of hooves shaking the earth. Against them, the desert itself seemed powerless. Yet it was further west, along the Niger River, that the desert's most famous kingdoms emerged. Ghana first, its wealth rooted in gold. Picture the court of the Ghanaian king in the 11th century. He sits beneath a canopy, adorned with gold jewelry, surrounded by dogs wearing collars of silver. Envoys kneel before him, their hands filled with tribute, salt, copper, textiles. His court glitters so brightly that Arab chroniclers, visiting from across the sands, could scarcely believe their eyes. Gold flowed like water here, drawn from mines whose exact locations were jealously guarded secrets. When Ghana waned, Mali rose. Imagine Timbuktu in its golden age, not just a trading post but a beacon of learning. The desert delivered salt and slaves to its gates, and in return, Mali gave gold and knowledge. Scholars filled its libraries with manuscripts, merchants filled its markets with wealth. And at its height, under Musa Musa, Mali's fame reached beyond Africa. When Musa made pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, he carried so much gold that he disrupted the economies of entire regions. Imagine the caravan, tens of thousands of people, camels loaded with treasure, the king himself glittering with jewels. Across the desert he marched, proof that wealth and power could not only survive at the desert's edge, they could flourish. Songhai followed, its armies vast, its cities thriving. Gao and Timbuktu pulsed with trade and scholarship. Picture Timbuktu at dusk, muezzins call to prayer, students crowd into study halls, merchants argue in markets lit by oil lamps. This was a world tied together by the desert. Salt flowed north, gold south, books west, ideas east. And always, the Sahara lay in between, a silent partner in every exchange. Step back and see the pattern. The Sahara was never a void. It was the stage upon which empires touched, where kingdoms to the south met traders of the north. Without the desert, these kingdoms would not have been what they were. The danger of its crossings magnified the value of what was carried. The silence of its sands made the voices of its cities all the louder. Yet even these great kingdoms were not eternal. Ghana crumbled under pressure from within and without. Mali fractured, its glory dimming after Mansa Musa's death. Songhai, mighty as it was, fell to Moroccan armies armed with gunpowder in the 16th century. Kanem Bornu endured longest, but even it weakened under modern pressures. The desert outlasted them all, swallowing their roads, scattering their people, leaving ruins to bake under a pitiless sun. Still, echoes remain. The libraries of Timbuktu, fragile manuscripts filled with wisdom, survive against all odds. The pyramids of Meroe still rise from the sands, sharp against the horizon. The memory of Mansa Musa's pilgrimage still circulates as legend, his wealth so great it seemed mythic. These kingdoms are gone, but their shadows linger, just as the desert itself preserves whispers of every age. Imagine now standing at the southern edge of the Sahara, looking north. The dunes roll endless, the air blurs with heat, the land looks lifeless. And yet you know better. You know that across that silence lie cities, ruins, wells, trade, memory. You know that this desert is not a barrier but a bridge, and that the kingdoms of the south walked across it with confidence. The wind rises again, warm and steady. Behind us, the Sahel pulses with life. Ahead, the desert opens once more. And somewhere in its heart, strange stone circles and pyramidal ruins still stand, their meanings uncertain, their builders unknown. We turn our steps toward them, ready to hear what they have to say. The voices of kings fade behind us, the clang of iron at Meroe's forges, the glitter of Mansa Musa's gold, the echo of hooves from Kanem Bornu's cavalry. The desert swallows them, as it always does, leaving only silence and wind. We walk deeper, farther, where no caravan bells ring and no markets murmur. Here, the Sahara speaks in stone. At first glance, it seems impossible. The dunes rise and fall like frozen waves, the horizon quivers in the heat, and the land appears empty of all human trace. But then, cresting a ridge, you see them, circles of stone, standing stubborn against the sand. Some are neat, arranged like beads on the earth. Others are ragged, half-buried, their purpose lost. They are scattered across the desert, from the far west of Mauritania to the eastern fringes of Sudan, hundreds of them, thousands. Imagine stepping into one of these circles at dawn. The air is cool, the sand soft, the stones rising waist-high around you. They cast long shadows across the ground, as if marking something, time, stars, spirits. You crouch, touch the rock. It is warm already, though the sun has barely risen, its surface worn smooth by hands that placed it here thousands of years ago. But why? Some say they are graves. Cairns built to honor the dead, their bones once resting beneath these rings. Archaeologists have found human remains in a few, suggesting burial. But many circles are empty. Were they cenotaphs, built not to house a body but to remember one? Or were they something else, markers of territory, shrines to unseen gods, calendars etched in stone? Look further. Not all structures are circles. In parts of the Sahara, pyramids rise, small, sharp, built by the Kushites in Nubia. Hundreds still stand, their tips jagged against the sky, their sides worn by wind. Picture them as they once were, gleaming white with plaster, their edges crisp, guarding the tombs of kings and queens. Inside, hieroglyphs told stories of power, murals painted gods into eternity. Now, the pyramids are lonely, battered by storms, their treasures long plundered. Yet they endure, stone against sand, monuments to rulers who dreamed of permanence in a land that offers none. And then there are stranger forms. In the Tasselite Plateau, stone towers rise like fingers, built from stacked slabs. In Mauritania, lines of upright stones stretch across ridges, as if pointing somewhere, perhaps to stars, perhaps to sacred ground. Imagine walking among them at night, the Milky Way blazing overhead. Each stone casts a shadow in the moonlight, and you feel watched, as though the builders left not only monuments but guardians. The desert is filled with such enigmas. In the Adrar of Mauritania, the Tikhit culture built villages of stone 3,000 years ago, their walls still visible, their granaries crumbling but distinct. Here, people farmed millet, kept cattle, carved a living from a land already turning dry. Their stone houses remain, silent, empty, the echoes of a society that endured for centuries before the sands finally drove them away. Pause with me in one of these villages. The walls rise to your waist, the doorways narrow, the rooms small but ordered. Imagine them filled again, clay pots stacked in corners, mats woven from reeds, a fire burning low. Outside, fields of millet ripple in the wind, herds graze on scrub grass, children chase one another between the houses. Now, nothing but silence. The millet fields are sand, the hearths are cold, the laughter gone. Yet the stones remain, patient witnesses. Why do stones endure when everything else vanishes? Wood rots, clay crumbles, but stone holds. The desert strips flesh, devours grain, erases paint, but it cannot wholly consume rock. That is why these circles and pyramids, these villages and alignments, still rise from the Sahara. They are the bones of forgotten societies, the skeletons of worlds the desert has tried to erase. But their meaning is elusive. Were the circles calendars, tracking the solstices, teaching farmers when to plant? Were the alignments markers of trade routes, guiding caravans across shifting sands? Were the pyramids not only tombs but statements, declarations of power carved against the indifference of the desert? We do not know. And perhaps that is fitting. The Sahara does not reveal its secrets easily. It prefers riddles. Imagine yourself as one of the builders. You carry a stone, heavy in your arms, across sand that scorches your feet. You place it carefully among others, fitting it into the circle. Around you, men and women do the same, their breath harsh in the heat, their hands raw. Why do you do this? Perhaps for a chief who has died. Perhaps for a god you fear. Perhaps because the stars demand it. Whatever the reason, the work is hard, but it is done. And centuries later, millennia later, a stranger finds it, and wonders. There is beauty in that mystery. Each circle, each pyramid, each wall is a conversation across time. The builders speak not with words, but with stone. They say, "We were here. We shaped this land. Remember us." And though the desert tries to silence them, still they speak. The wind stirs again, carrying grains of sand that sting your skin. The stones blur, half covered, their shadows fading. By tomorrow, perhaps, they will be buried again. But for tonight you have seen them. You know they exist. And as you walk on, the memory of circles and pyramids follows, haunting, unresolved. Ahead, the desert grows quieter still. No stones rise, no ruins break the monotony. But in this silence lies another kind of loss, deeper than walls or cities, the loss of voices themselves. For the people who built these circles and pyramids also spoke languages, sang songs, told stories. Most are gone, erased with time. Only fragments carved in stone remain, preserving the faintest echo of tongues that once filled the Sahara with words. The desert waits, holding those lost voices in silence. And we follow, step by step, deeper into its library of forgetting. The stone circles fade into the dunes, their meanings unresolved, their builders nameless. The desert reclaims their outlines, covering them grain by grain, until they are once again swallowed by silence. And silence, that is where the Sahara is most deceptive. For once, this land was not silent at all. It rang with voices, with laughter, with songs and arguments, with prayers whispered to gods whose names we no longer know. Words filled the air here. Whole languages thrived, spoken in marketplaces, shouted across fields, sung at weddings, murmured to children as they fell asleep. Now they are gone. Imagine standing in the middle of the desert at dusk, the wind carrying nothing but its own endless sigh. Close your eyes, and try to picture the voices that once lived here. A mother calling her child in a tongue no one speaks anymore. A priest chanting in a dialect whose gods have been forgotten. A merchant bargaining in a language that has no descendants, no dictionary, no memory. All of it vanished. This is the Sahara's cruelest trick. It does not only bury cities or dry rivers, it erases speech itself. The people who built the Fogaras, who carved giraffes into rock, who stacked stones into circles, what did they call themselves? What names did they give their gods, their rivers, their children? The desert has kept those secrets. And yet, not everything is lost. Here and there, carved into stone, scratched on pottery, etched in faint symbols, we find fragments of their words. They come to us like whispers, tantalizing, incomplete. Take the Tifinagh script, still used by the Tuareg today. Its roots stretch deep into the Sahara, perhaps as far back as 2,500 years. Picture an ancient hand pressing chisel to rock, carving straight lines and dots, simple symbols, but symbols with meaning. Was it a boundary marker? A message to travelers? A name? Some inscriptions read like graffiti, casual, everyday. I was here. Others seem more solemn, memorials to the dead. Tifinagh is still alive, sung in Tuareg songs, painted on their jewelry, written in their books. But its earliest forms remain mysterious, half understood. The desert preserved the letters but swallowed the voices that spoke them. Go back further still, to the Libico-Berber inscriptions. Thousands of them scatter the Sahara, scratched into cliffs and stones. Imagine crouching before one in the desert heat. You trace the lines with your fingertip, straight, angular, deliberate. It is writing, yes, but of a language we barely understand. Scholars debate their meaning. Were they dedications, laws, prayers? Did they record lineages of chiefs, victories in battle, boundaries of land? The people who carved them lived and died convinced their words would last. And in a way, they did. The stone holds them still. But their voices are gone, the code half lost, the meaning blurred. Even earlier, the rock art itself is a kind of language. Hunters, dancers, herders carved their world into stone, telling stories in pictures. They spoke not in letters but in images, giraffes taller than men, fish swimming in rivers now dry, chariots racing across plains. To us, it feels like art. To them, perhaps it was communication, memory, even law. Each image is a sentence. Each carving is a word in a language without sound. Pause here, and think of the enormity of what has been lost. Linguists estimate that more than half of all human languages that ever existed are gone. In the Sahara, the number is impossible to guess. Languages that lived for centuries, shaping thought, guiding rituals, structuring dreams, erased without a trace. When the last speaker of each tongue died, the desert absorbed their words, scattering them like sand. But every so often, the silence cracks. A stone unearthed, a tablet discovered, a script deciphered. Imagine the moment when an archaeologist brushes sand from an inscription and sees letters emerge, untouched for 2,000 years. The first time light falls on them again, it feels like resurrection. Words meant for neighbors or descendants suddenly speak to strangers across millennia. Even if we cannot understand them fully, their presence alone is a victory over forgetting. Think of the Tuareg nomad, tracing Tifinagh letters in the sand for a child. Think of ancient scribes etching Libico-Berber on cliffs where caravans passed. Think of traders calling across a market in a tongue that now has no name. These are voices that echo faintly still, caught in fragments, preserved by stone and memory. And yet, the silence grows heavier as we walk deeper into the desert. For even as we recover some inscriptions, most of the words are gone forever. What myths were sung at firesides? What lullabies calmed children in the night? What curses, what blessings, what jokes filled the air? We will never know. That is the Sahara's greatest melancholy. It is not just a graveyard of cities, but a graveyard of voices. And so we walk through it as if through a library burned to ash, finding only fragments of pages, trying to guess the stories that once filled the shelves. Ahead, the wind sharpens, carrying dust that stings the eyes. The silence deepens. And as the dunes rise around us, it becomes clear what the desert has always been, not just a keeper of secrets, but a devourer. It does not only hide languages, it consumes whole lives, whole cultures, burying them beneath waves of sand. Ahead lies the truth of this, the Sahara as a grave, not just of words, but of worlds. The echoes of lost languages fade into the wind, their symbols half buried in stone, their voices long extinguished. And as we walk farther, the truth of the Sahara presses in heavier, more merciless. The desert does not only erase words, it erases worlds. Step by step, dune by dune, it becomes clear, the Sahara is not just silence, not just emptiness. It is a grave. Picture the sand not as lifeless grains but as a vast shroud, covering everything beneath it. Each dune is a tombstone. Each drift is a coffin lid. Beneath this endless blanket lie lives once lived in full, villages of farmers, towns of traders, whole empires that dared to challenge the desert. The sand did not need to destroy them with violence, it simply waited. It buried walls until roofs collapsed, covered wells until they dried, drifted into doorways until homes were sealed forever. Slowly, quietly, the desert consumes. Imagine a caravan caught in a sandstorm. The sky darkens, the sun disappears, and the air becomes a wall of grit and wind. Camels scream, men shout, but their voices are drowned in the roar. The storm lasts hours, maybe days. When it clears, silence falls. The caravan is gone, buried under dunes. Bones whiten beneath the sand, forgotten. To stumble across them centuries later is to find a graveyard with no names. Now picture an entire city swallowed this way. Walls rising one year, gone the next. Families fleeing when their wells dried, leaving behind pots, tools, even food still in jars. The wind moves in, relentless, covering everything. Within a generation, no one remembers the city's name. Within a millennium, no one even knows it existed. The desert buries not only the living but memory itself. Archaeologists uncover hints of this constantly. Pottery shards scattered across dune slopes. Foundations of houses, half buried. Skeletons, sometimes curled in graves, sometimes sprawled where death caught them. Each find is a reminder that what looks like emptiness is full of the dead. The Sahara is not barren. It is crowded, but with ghosts. And yet, the burial is paradoxical. For even as the sand destroys, it preserves. A body buried in the desert may lie untouched for centuries, the dry air halting decay. Mummies have been found here, not embalmed by priests, but by the desert itself. Skin still clinging to bone, hair still intact, clothing still wrapped around the limbs. To look upon them is to look upon faces that stared at the same dunes thousands of years ago. Pause with me now. Imagine kneeling beside one of these graves. The wind is still, the air sharp. You brush sand from a skull, its teeth gritted, its empty eyes staring upward. Around it lie fragments of daily life, a pot for grain, a bead necklace, a tool. The person lived, worked, laughed, loved. And now they lie here, anonymous, their story erased except for what little the sand chose to preserve. It is haunting, yes, but also intimate. For a moment, you share the silence with them. The desert is full of such moments. Ancient cemeteries scattered across dunes, bones bleached by sun. Mass graves of caravans lost. The quiet entombment of cities, their outlines still visible from the sky but gone at ground level. To walk the Sahara is to walk across graves so vast they stretch beyond imagination. And this is not only the past. Even today, the desert claims lives. Migrants crossing from sub-Saharan Africa toward the north often vanish into the sands. Their bones lie where they fell, unmarked, uncounted. The Sahara continues to feed its grave, adding layer upon layer of silence. The tragedy of today echoes the tragedies of millennia past. But there is another way to see it. Perhaps the desert is not only a grave, but a guardian. By burying, it protects. By erasing, it preserves fragments until we are ready to find them. Without the sand, would the rock art have survived? Would the Favaras have lain hidden long enough to escape destruction? Would the mummies still bear their faces? Perhaps the desert is both tomb and archive, cruel and generous at once. Stand with me now on a high dune. Look outward. The Sahara stretches like an ocean, dunes rolling like waves, their crests glowing in moonlight. Each one may hide a story. Each one may cover a city, a graveyard, a forgotten life. You feel the weight of it, the silence, the enormity, the sorrow. And yet you also feel all. For in this grave, memory still lingers. Not everything is lost. The wind rises, tugging at your clothes, hissing across the sand. The graves lie quiet, but ahead, life stirs again. For though the desert devours, people endure. Even now, nomadic tribes walk these dunes, carrying stories that remember, however faintly, the green world that came before. Oral traditions, passed from mouth to mouth, survive where writing did not. And so, from the grave, voices emerge once more. The Sahara exhales, and we step forward, leaving behind its tombs, walking toward the echoes of the living. Toward the people who still call this desert home, who carry in their songs and stories the memories of ancestors buried long ago. The dunes shift behind us, their crests glowing under moonlight, their hollows heavy with silence. We have walked across graves, of cities, of languages, of lives. And yet, even as the Sahara buries, it does not silence everything. Some voices survive, carried not in stone or pottery but in memory. They drift like smoke through time, borne by the people who still walk these sands. These are the echoes in the present, the whispers of ancestors kept alive in stories, in songs, in rituals that resist forgetting. Imagine sitting at night with a nomadic family in the desert. The fire burns low, the stars blaze sharp above, and the air is cool, almost gentle. Around you, camels kneel in silence, their silhouettes black against the dunes. Children huddle close to their mother, their eyes wide as the old man begins to speak. His voice is low, steady, almost a chant. He tells of ancestors who farmed valleys where now there is only sand. Of lakes so vast they swallowed the horizon. Of rivers where crocodiles slid and hippos sang at dusk. The children listen as if it were legend, but you know it is history. These are memories of the Green Sahara, passed mouth to mouth for thousands of years. The Tuareg are among the keepers of such memory. Wrapped in indigo robes, their faces veiled, they move across the desert as their ancestors did. They carry stories of lost cities like Zuzura, the city of birds, hidden by jinn and guarded by mystery. They sing in Tamashek, using the Tifinagh script that has survived since ancient times. Each letter drawn in sand, each song sung by fire, is an act of defiance against silence. They are living bridges between the Sahara that was and the Sahara that is. Listen closer, and you hear fragments of older worlds and their traditions. Songs that praise the rain with a longing too deep to be mere prayer. They are echoes of ancestors who lived with rivers and lakes. Rituals that honor spirits of the desert, guardians of wells and oases, whose origins may reach back to times when water was plentiful. Even the routes they follow across the dunes carry memory. Caravans walk paths worn over millennia, the same tracks once used by Garamantian raiders, Carthaginian traders, Arab scholars. Every step is a repetition of history. But the echoes are not only in nomadic life. In towns at the desert's edge, Agadez, Timbuktu, Gatams, the architecture itself whispers of the past. Mud brick walls rise high, their facades carved with patterns passed down for generations. The mosques of Timbuktu, built of mud and wood, still stand after centuries, maintained year after year by the hands of local families. Within them, libraries of manuscripts, tens of thousands of texts, preserve the intellectual legacy of the Sahara's golden age. Scholars wrote of medicine, astronomy, poetry, law. Even as the desert buried cities, it could not bury the words of ink. To hold one of these manuscripts today is to hear a voice carried across time, refusing to be silenced. And there are the crafts. A Tuareg silversmith hammers a bracelet, its design echoing patterns seen in rock art thousands of years old. A woman weaves a mat, her hands repeating motions passed from mother to daughter for generations. A storyteller begins a tale with the same opening line his ancestors used, a formula older than memory. These are not accidents. They are continuity, threads of the green Sahara woven into the present. Even the food carries memory. Dates, milk, millet porridge, the same staples that sustained desert peoples for millennia. Sit with a family and taste the sweetness of dates, the richness of milk poured from a goat just milked, the earthy comfort of grain boiled into porridge. These are the flavors of survival, unchanged across time, echoes of meals eaten beside vanished lakes, beneath long-buried walls. But perhaps the strongest echoes live in music. Imagine the sound of an imzad, a single-stringed instrument played by Tuareg women. Its tone is thin, haunting, yet powerful, rising into the night like a voice from another age. The melody carries sorrow and resilience both. It is the desert in sound, endless, mournful, proud. Alongside it, drums beat steady, echoing the rhythm of camel steps across dunes. The music is not just entertainment, it is memory, a way of carrying the past into the present. And yet these echoes are fragile. Modern pressures press hard against them. Borders cut across nomadic routes. Climate change pushes desertification further, squeezing life from oases. Languages dwindle, stories fade, manuscripts crumble. The desert silence threatens again, as relentless as ever. But still, people resist. They tell the stories. They sing the songs. They repair the manuscripts, copy them, digitize them, refusing to let memory vanish. Pause here. Imagine a child sitting by firelight, her eyes wide as her grandfather tells of lakes where crocodiles swam. She cannot see such lakes now, but she believes him, because the story is alive, because it is hers to inherit. That child is proof that the Sahara's past is not only buried, it breathes still, in voices carried forward. We rise and walk on. The fire fades behind us, the stars wheel overhead, and the desert resumes its silence. Yet now the silence feels less final. It is not emptiness, but waiting. Waiting for us to listen to its echoes, to hear in the present the faint rhythm of all that came before. Ahead, the dunes stretch vast and endless. But beneath them lie not only graves, not only ruins, but entire chapters of human history still waiting to be read. The Sahara is not only a desert. It is a library, vast and silent, holding secrets the sand has not yet given back. And so we walk toward the end of our journey, toward the truth the desert keeps, that beneath its silence lies memory, and within its shifting sands lie the stories of us all. The fire dies behind us, the voices of storytellers fade into the night, and once more the Sahara spreads out in silence. Step by step, dune by dune, we have followed its whispers, from vanished rivers to phantom cities, from rock art etched in cliffs to languages carved in stone. Now the journey draws to its close, and the desert itself seems to breathe around us, vast, ancient, unreadable. It feels less like a wasteland now, and more like something else entirely. Not an emptiness, but a presence. Not a void, but a library. Imagine standing at the crest of a high dune at dawn. The horizon glows pale, the first light painting the sand in gold. From here, the Sahara rolls outward in every direction, endless and still. To most eyes it looks empty. But now, after walking with it, you see differently. Each dune is a page, each buried ruin a paragraph, each fragment of pottery or inscription a single word. The desert is not silence. It is a book written in a language of wind and stone. We have only skimmed its surface, but the pages run deep, written across 10,000 years of memory. Think of what lies beneath our feet. Rivers that once flowed, their courses still etched into the land like faded ink. Lakes that once spread across horizons, their shorelines ghosting through satellite images. Civilizations that rose in defiance of the desert, Garamantes, Tikrit, Kush, Mali, now folded into its pages, their stories half erased but never gone. Languages spoken in marketplaces and around fires, their words scattered like sand grains, yet still faintly audible in fragments of script. The Sahara is not an absence. It is an archive. But it is an archive unlike any other. For most libraries preserve, carefully, deliberately. The desert preserves by accident, by indifference. It buries without choosing, hides without care, reveals only when storms or human persistence uncover its secrets. That is its cruelty, and its wonder. It keeps treasures locked away, but it also ensures that some survive, waiting for discovery. Picture an archaeologist brushing sand from a shard of pottery, the pattern on its surface revealed after 2,000 years. In that moment, the desert yields a word from its book. Picture a Tuareg elder tracing Tifinagh letters in the sand, the same script carved into rocks millennia ago. In that moment, the desert repeats a sentence. Picture the ruins of Timbuktu's libraries, manuscripts lifted carefully from hiding places where families guarded them for centuries. In that moment, the desert opens a chapter. Each discovery is not just evidence. It is a page turned, a fragment of the story returned to us. Yet the book is far from finished. The Sahara still holds chapters we cannot yet read. Under dunes lie towns no one has mapped, inscriptions no one has translated, tombs no one has opened. How many languages are gone forever, buried so deep that not even a fragment remains? How many myths vanished with the last storyteller who carried them? The library of the desert is vast, but its catalogue is broken. We wander its halls blind, guided only by chance and persistence. And so the Sahara teaches us humility. Civilizations rise, build, sing, write, and the desert reminds us they can vanish. Not in fire or conquest, but in silence. A shift in climate, a drying of rivers, and whole societies become footnotes, their work scattered, their names forgotten. The sand does not rage, it does not fight. It only waits. And in waiting it wins. But there is also comfort in this. For if the desert can erase, it can also protect. Without sand, would the rock art of Tassili still show hunters and dancers? Without burial, would the Fagaras of the Garamanti still stretch unseen beneath the ground? Without silence, would Timbuktu's manuscripts still sleep in family chests? The desert is cruel, yes, but it is also keeper, archivist, reluctant guardian. Stand now on the dune with me. The sun rises higher, the air grows warm. You look out, and the desert shimmers like water, like memory itself. You know now that it is not empty. Beneath the silence are voices. Beneath the sand are worlds. The Sahara is not a grave alone. It is a library of secrets, vast and unfinished, its shelves built of dunes, its archives written in wind. And perhaps one day, more of its pages will be read. Science will uncover the cities still buried, satellites will trace the ghost rivers, linguists will piece together the lost scripts. Perhaps the Sahara's silence will be broken further, its secrets returned to the living. Until then, it waits. It always waits. The wind shifts, carrying a low hiss across the dunes. It sounds almost like a whisper, like words half heard, calling across time. You close your eyes, and for a moment you hear them, the voices of hunters carving giraffes, of farmers tending lockshores, of traders guiding caravans, of kings in their courts, of storytellers by firelight. All of them speaking at once, layered into the desert's silence. And so, as night settles once more, we let the Sahara rest. The journey is complete, the pages we could glimpse have been turned. The desert keeps its secrets still, but it has shown us enough to know the truth. This is not emptiness. It is memory. And as we leave it behind, stepping out of its vast library, may its echoes guide us gently, not into more footsteps across sand, but into dreams.